He has spoken on the topics faith, family and freedom in Cuba, Belgium, Brazil, Congo, UK and all over the USA to crowds from 14 to 40,000. International leadership speaker, trainer and coach. Author of Learn to Raw Leadership, Attitude Hack, Live a More Excellent Life, 5 Battle Strategies of a Victorious Warrior. 2021 President's Lifetime Achievement Award recipient. Founding partner of the John Maxwell team. Toastmaster International Speech Competition semi-finalist. Founder of Tell It Like It Is TV, ThatGuyRocks.com and ThatGuySpeaks.com. Creator of Story Power TV, Transforming Grace TV, and Leading Leaders Podcast. Producer of 4 TV programs and podcasts for Liftable TV and World Trumpet Television as well as multiple social media channels. Please help me welcome J. Loren Norris.
Have you ever been in a conversation with someone and you realize about halfway through that you're way in over your head? And by that I mean they've just got so much data, so much information, so much understanding that you feel like you can't even keep up. Every subject matter that you want to bring it back around to your comfort zone, you realize, yeah, I don't know that as well as they do. I find myself in that position on a regular basis, and I do it on purpose. And it spurs me on to look for more of what I don't know. Because I don't like being in that position of, you don't know what you don't know. I want to know what I don't know. And that's what I want to talk about in this episode of Leading Leaders.
Subscribe now for our extensive video library of leadership lessons promoting faith, family, and freedom.
I'm J. Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast. And if you had a chance to watch while the intro was rolling in, you had a chance to see this stack of books on my table. And those are all books that I have had for a while. Many of them I've read cover to cover. Some I'm still waiting to study. But I can tell you right now, there's this thing about the human brain that we have these conceptions that we come to usually between 1 and 7 years old, according to Dr. Bruce Lipton, that the ideas of our subconscious mind are already anchored in. They're already set in place. And they could be wrong ideas. They could be incorrect emotional responses. They could be unintentional manipulations of our preconceived notions and our unconscious biases. And all of these happen from the people that we hang out with, the people that we're raised by, the kids that we go to school with, the comedians we listen to, the movies we watch, the cartoons we intake, the books we read, the video games we play. And for most of our lives, we think, it's just life. That's just life the way I know it. I listened to a fascinating interview between Roseanne Barr, the 40-year veteran comedian, and Dr. Jordan Peterson, the 45-year veteran psychoanalyst. That'll mess with your head when you start listening to what really happens in good comedy. How intentional is the emotional rise and fall? What does it really mean to get the gasp out of someone, to cause them to involuntarily respond? I have the book. I didn't add it to this stack. I should have. It's called Ha! And it's actually a psychoanalytical look at comedy and what it is that causes the involuntary response of laughter. Most laughter, most spontaneous laughter brought about by a comedian is before you get a chance to think about it. Meaning it's subconscious. It's a trigger of your subconscious emotions. And it's something that causes an involuntary outburst of air. Ha! Ha 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 ha. If you can get that going several times, that's what a comedian considers a win. That's how you know you're killing them, because they're trying to take in a breath. I never knew that before I watched this interview. But I've studied the book Ha. I've studied comedy, what makes people funny. I've intentionally written stories that are real life stories from my own life that I've poured over, intentionally gone through word by word, line by line, emotion by emotion, to make sure that I convey the emotion I experienced when I lived through the story. I've worked on those stories very hard. I tell all my coaching clients you should have 100 stories so that you can pluck it out of the lesson or the matter that you're trying to convey. And look for another story that fits the emotional moment. It fits the audience in front of you. It fits the direction you're trying to lead them. It may make the same point, but it's a completely different story with different characters, with different emotional sets, with different responses, maybe even with the same call to action, but it makes you feel differently before you get to the action. See, the reason that I've got this big stack of books here, though, is I want you to understand that when you begin to put things in your mind, like, I'm just going to show you this stack real quick. This is Righteous Troublemakers by Reverend Al Sharpton. This is Never Split the Different. This is Chris Voss, former CIA, a specialist in negotiation. And how do you get people to do what you want them to do? This is You Can Read Anyone. This is a book about the inner psychology of getting people to reveal themselves even when they try to be cloak and dagger, even when they try to hide their emotions from you. How do you get deep inside their thought processes? This is David Lieberman, PhD. This is The Parasitic Mind by Gad Saad. This talks about all the stuff that we hang on to in our subconscious mind that can eventually destroy us. The war against truth, and if we don't win it, the intellectual freedom will be the casualty. That's the byline on the back. Pretty impressive insights to the way the humans think. Oh, here you go. This book's 25 years old almost, published in 2000, Indiana University textbook. Globalization and the Challenges of a New Century. From Y2K. How about this one? Blackout by Candace Owens. These kinds of books, they really challenge the way you think. I don't care what you already think. There's a good possibility that when you start talking about globalization, the parasitic mind, the how to read anyone, how to split the difference in negotiations, these political science books, these personal experience books, this doesn't fit the narrative of everything you've heard kind of books. They really make you wake up and think. How about this one? Marx and Engels, the Communist Manifesto. Yeah, put that against the globalization and ask yourself, what's really going on in the world? There's so much data here. There's so much information, so much. How about the Tears We Cannot Stop? This is Michael Eric Dyson. These two people, by the way, both African Americans, both thinkers, both in the political scene, both considered high intellectuals. They do not even remotely agree. Let that one settle in for a minute. Because a lot of people would tell you if their skin color is the same, they have the same thought processes. If they grew up in the same part of the world, they have the same thought processes. If they look alike, they think alike. Trust me, I've been to the Congo. It is not remotely true. Just because they look alike doesn't mean they think alike, vote alike, spend their money alike. Doesn't work like that. And these two can prove it. And so study them both, I recommend. How about this one? How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram Kendi. Again, these three are all African-American intellectuals, all very involved in the political scene, all very involved in the media scene, and they don't agree with each other at all. How about this one? Let's go back 100 plus years and let's talk about Frederick Douglass. Because these are some of the original writings of Frederick Douglass, a narrative on the life of Frederick Douglass. This is his poetry, his thought processes, his conversations with Abraham Lincoln. They're similar to this and absolutely nothing like this. So why would I read all of the above? Well, because I don't want to be like any one of them. I want to understand as much as I can all of them. How about this one? Primary colors. Let's take this whole conversation about the mind, the intellect, the racism, the divisions in our nation, the impact that it has on our culture and our country, and anonymous. We don't even know who wrote it, right? Wrong. How about this one? The Hollywood Commandments. This is a look from the inside of what goes on in Hollywood. What does it take to be successful? What do you have to do to make it big, to be wealthy, to become Important. Identify how to use what makes you unique to propel your career. Overcome fear and build the courage to pursue new opportunities. Gain the confidence to make important life decisions with greater peace and clarity. Negotiate the life and career advancement you deserve. That ought to mess with your head a little bit, because the priorities in Hollywood have changed over the last 100 years, wouldn't you think? How about herding tigers? This is what it means to be a leader, according to Son Henry, the author of Accidental Creative. Be the leader that creative people need, because leading creative people is different than leading people who are not creatives. That's a true statement. Creatives are very different. They have a whole different way of looking at the world. And then, of course, we've got to add in Moving Forward by Corinne Jean-Pierre, current press secretary for the White House. She, too, has a completely different way of looking at the world. And it's important that we understand all of these things. It's important as a leader that we consider what it means to move through the various ways that we think, the why that we think, the how that we think. And as I even ponder that, I remember, and I quote this from the conversation between Dr. Jordan Peterson and Roseanne Barr. She said, sometimes it's necessary as a comedian to rearrange all the furniture in your mind. And Dr. Peterson confirmed. He said it absolutely is necessary to rearrange the furniture in your mind, because you're not exactly sure how it got there sometimes. He said, but unfortunately, sometimes when you remove it, that's when the bugs and the spiders come out. That's a profound thought. If you just took the metaphor of rearranging the furniture in your mind and ask yourself, what are the bugs and the spiders in the thought processes of my mind that are moving around in there? What are those living things that are hiding in the dark? What kind of impact are they having? I mean, we think of the black widow spider, or the brown recluse, how it might just pop up out of nowhere and bite you, and suddenly your life has changed, perhaps even over. But that little spider, that tiny little critter, is 1,000 times smaller than you, and yet potent for your life. And a thought can be the same. Hidden behind the sofa, hiding underneath that piece of furniture you hadn't moved in forever. Sometimes I pull these books off the shelf, and I hate to say they're dusty. Why? Well, because I haven't handled them in enough time. It's been too long since I touched them last, and that's not a good sign. But what happens when that happens inside your mind? What happens when you're not thinking frequently enough to remove the spiders that are setting up shop between the end table and the lamp? When the furniture in your mind hasn't been moved enough to have been vacuumed under for decades? When the thoughts that you have, the ones that control the way that you behave and the relationships that you build and the things that you do for your career, when those thoughts are so old and dusty, they haven't been looked at or revisited, they haven't been considered or poked at in a long time. Now, I want to take all this and I want to put this in the context of an interview that I watched yesterday, which was kind of chilling, and in context with a growing trend that we see even in what I'm doing right now, even in what I'm doing in this very minute, talking in front of a microphone, in front of a camera. Now, one of the reasons, I have a backdrop behind me right now, but one of the reasons that I use the multi-camera setup in my studio is because I want you to be able to see that I'm live and I'm touching these things. I'm real. I'm here. I'm not made up. I'm not hiding in front of a green screen. No, this is really my studio. All these books on my table, they came off of this shelf right here. Well, a couple of them came off my desk in the other room, but most of them came off this shelf right here. And why is that important? Why do you care? Well, because a little meme that I saw yesterday said, I want AI to be busy about doing the dishes and sweeping the floor, not writing my books and creating my courses. And I think that was a better articulation that I've come up with so far. I can't tell you who I saw it from, but I shared it. It's the truth. I haven't quite put it into words like that yet, but there's something about AI that concerns me. I won't call it a fear, but I will call it a concern. See, I can look at any one of these books, except this anonymous book. I'd have to look and see who it was actually compiled by. It says author anonymous, but Frederick Douglass or Candace Owens or Chris Voss or any one of these that I can pick up the book and say, here's the general subject, here's the general theme, here's what we're going to talk about. I know the source, and instantly that I know the source, I can begin to contrast and compare the credibility of the source, the background of the source, their worldview, their mainframe. Where did they start? How did they come to this conclusion? Because see, on the other shelf over there, I have some fiction novels. Most of what I read is nonfiction, but I do have some fiction novels. And in those fiction novels, I realize that a great writer, I also have Stephen King's book on writing, which will really mess with your head. He's a phenomenal communicator. I'm not sure that the anchored foundation of his writing and thinking is as solid as we would like to believe. R.R. Tolkien is another one of those who has a phenomenal concept of the fiction. Frank Peretti is one of my favorites. His fictional stuff is off the charts good. But see, Jerry B. Jenkins, Dallas Jenkins, all these guys, they all have this one really good quality, and that is to take you on an emotional roller coaster through a journey that while you know from the time you picked up the book, it was fiction, you're living through experiences vicariously of other people. You get to know them. You get to know the characters in the book. You begin to have an off-site relationship with them. You know what they're going through. In fact, if an author is really good in that fiction writing, there's some presumptive relationship that the reader begins to have with that character. You begin to think, oh, he's not going to like that, even before the moment happens. You're reading about an offside kind of a theme. This is going to happen over here, and I see this relationship, and I see this argument, and I know when Dad walks in, wow, he's just going to blow up. This is going to be... And if the character stays true to the character that's created, that's exactly what happens in the scene. When that character walks into that moment and their reaction to the moment is not what you expected, it begins to corrupt the way you think about the author, about the character in the story, about the scene in the story. It makes you begin to wonder, did I miss something? Did I misread something? How does this person react to that moment differently than what I anticipated? And it really starts to mess with your head and with your emotions. But see, a good writer will take you on that emotional roller coaster. They'll take you off on a ride to the fact that you reach the point where if the roller coaster were at the top and about to free fall 100 yards, you would actually feel while reading the book, while watching the movie, while listening to the podcast, you would feel that moment where your stomach is up in your throat. Your emotions are reacting. Your body is physically reacting to what your mind is perceiving. Now, I want you to set that reality of psychoanalysis aside for 1 second, because you know that it's true. In the greatest movies, when you shed a tear, in the greatest movies, when you want to jump out of your seat and scream and yell, in the greatest movies, when you feel the same frustration and anger as the characters on the screen, when a great book is written in a way that you know that that's true, here's what you also know to be true. You have been managed into that emotion. Manipulated would be another word for that. You've been pushed to the place where you feel empathetically with the characters in the movie. The same frustration, the same irritation, the same angst, anxiety, fear, horror. That's what it takes to write good stories. That's what it takes to communicate in an effective way. But let me also say that when you understand human psychology and how people think and how they feel and how their cultural differences, their socioeconomic backgrounds, their upbringing. If you grew up in a trailer park like Theo Vaughn, you have a different set of comic relief than, say, someone who grew up in the Ivy League. Two different worldviews, two different sets of experiences. The things that you find funny are completely different. Why? Because your internal clock, your subconscious understandings, your preconditioned notions, your pre-existing biases, they're different because of your upbringing that first 1 to 7 years. And as you go through life and you add new things on top of that, you may change that understanding. You may rearrange that furniture. You may think, well, I've heard this all my life and now I know that's not true. That was a manipulation in itself. It was actually a lie. And I think that's probably the most heartbreaking for most people is when they have that moment. Some call it woke, some say it's awake, some say it's a revelation or a discovery that you come headlong into the idea that everything you believed up to this point was a lie. You realize that you've been manipulated, like the fictional writer. Someone's been pouring data into your life that wasn't necessarily true. Maybe it's about medications. Maybe it's about your health. Maybe it's about vaccinations. Maybe it's about the role of your government. Maybe it's about how money is spent or made. I heard someone actually say the other day, the reason that we're in so much debt is because people don't pay enough taxes. Okay, that's a really messed up economic theory. When you think that by spending more money and then charging people more taxes, more money will appear. Stop spending the money that you have. Stop spending on things that you don't have the money to pay for. I mean, that's what my mom always told me. If you can't afford to buy it, don't. Don't borrow against your future to pay for today. Save, set aside, reallocate, rebudget. But see, we've been told most of our lives that if we just tax more, if we just borrow more, we can have the lifestyle we want today, and there'll never be future consequences. What a delusion! Why would we live with that understanding of life? And yet, there's a whole lot of money spent. They call them the madmen, the Madison Avenue advertisers. They became geniuses in understanding the psychology of people and creating in them the want. I have that book up here somewhere as well. I have a client whose father was a madman, who actually worked on Madison Avenue building ad campaigns, persuading people to buy things they didn't have to have. They may want them, but they didn't need them. It wasn't about survival. It was about status quo. It was about societal advancement. But see, when you realize that all of these tools and techniques of manipulating people and causing them to change what they want, what they understand, what they believe, they're all based on data. Data. Understanding the information about who you are. If I know where you grew up, I have a pretty good idea of the kind of things you're going to find funny. If I know what your background is, what your relational situation is, are you married? Are you divorced? Do you have kids? Do you have no kids? Do you have grandkids? How old are your kids? Where'd you go to college? Did you go to college? Did you get a degree? One of my favorite things to ask a waitress when I go into a restaurant is, what are you going to school for? Because almost everyone who's waiting tables is in college or just about to graduate. And when they tell me that, it's often very revealing how the personality that I've engaged with while they're serving our table matches the career field that they want. And the ones that tell me, well, I've had 4 different majors and I'm 5 years in and I haven't graduated yet, but hopefully next year, I think that's sad. You'll be serving these tables for a long time. I challenged one just the other day. She's changed her major 3 times. She really wants to be a tattoo artist, but she thinks she might go in the career field of medicine. Which one of those is really your personality? Who's the real you? Who's the who that you are? And so I challenged her to take strengths finders and figure out who she really is. And she said, well, all of my family's in education, so maybe I'll just go that way. And I'm like, don't go that way unless you're wired that way. You'll find yourself 5-10 years in miserably hating it, like a bad relationship. But see, this is just a little bit of data that I need. I need to be able to parse just a little bit of information about you and then compare it to all the other things that I've read. Because if I can take that little bit of data and I can compare it with all the other things that I've read and I can contrast it with the things that I understand now and the leadership that I've studied and the communication skills, then suddenly I can put you into a parameter where I can lead you down a course. And that's what a great fiction writer does. Because people who read Bodhi Thane, people who read Frank Peretti, people who read Stephen King, people who read books in the ilk of, sci-fi, people who read in that vein think in that way. It's a character trait. It's the natural who they are. And so if you think you're going to move from writing country and Western history or romance novels to writing science fiction, you may be a phenomenal writer, but that doesn't necessarily mean you understand the psychology of that audience of reader. So here's where that idea that I should be busy about sweeping my floors and cleaning my dishes rather than writing my history and my future comes in. See, the effort necessary for a great writer, a great fiction writer, a great storyteller, a great leader, a great communicator, the necessary skill set of evaluating the audience in front of you, of understanding who they are and how you're going to connect with them, that's a discipline. It's a discipline associated with data. Here's a rub. I heard a 4-star general tell Patrick Bet-David the other day, our Constitution makes it illegal for the American government to track the data that is being poured into the public arena by individual citizens. Meaning, when I take a picture of my dinner and it tells you what restaurant I'm at and who I'm hanging out with, and you're able to use that social media metadata and say, here's the 7 people sitting at that table right now, and these people come from these walks of life and they have this kind of education, and the reason they're here is the common thread between. And I don't know if you do this, but when I get a friend invitation on a social media platform, the first thing I do is look at them and see who we have as mutual friends, because how many mutual friends we have and why we have that many mutual friends tells me a lot about whether or not I should connect with them. I know you do the same thing. But see, the amount of time that it takes, the discipline it takes for me as a leader to do that, when I consider an audience that I'm going to speak to, when I consider a client that I'm going to work with, to understand where we met and how we cross paths and what they might expect of me, that's my due diligence before I engage in a contract. The amount of data, the amount of time, the amount of discipline it takes for me personally to do that could be exorbitant. But see, it's illegal for the U.S. government to track that information on you. It's a violation of our First Amendment rights. It's not a violation for the social media companies. And so not only do they track that data, they sell that data, often to the highest bidder. Sometimes that's just to the local restaurant to say, and I can tell you this for a fact, I recently went for a 4-year-old's birthday party to the teddy bear factory. I can't remember the name of it, this Build-A-Bear, in a specific mall, in a specific town that's like 2 hours from my home. I've been getting emails from that mall on a daily basis since then. I didn't sign up for anything in that mall. I didn't send them an email. I didn't ask them to send me emails. I never even took my phone out while I was in that mall. How did I get on their mailing list? It's called geofencing. And with geofencing, they track my device. They buy the data from my social media company. And now they know who I am and where I live. And if I'm ever within proximity of that mall again, I'm sure I will get all kinds of notices from every store in the mall, specifically the ones that I walked by last time. That's what happens when the information about you is sold. Now, let's put all that together really quick and understand that for me to take the time to read this stack of books, this is half of the stack that I showed you all ago. This is half of it. So double that, and then ask yourself, how long would it take me to read, comprehend, understand, and apply the knowledge of the contrast of these books? The social-political aspects, the racial aspects, the emotional understanding aspects, the division of the mind aspects, how those things all come together. Well, it would take me weeks, months. What I've got has taken me 30 years of study. AI can do that in about 5 minutes or less. They can read your entire social media feed for as long as you've been involved in social media in seconds. Not only that, but also can extrapolate every relationship you've had, every conversation you've had, every tweet you've ever sent, everything that's ever been canceled. Even because of the Wayback Machine, they can find the ones you deleted and who responded to them and the comments that were on them and cross-reference those things in a matter of seconds. If you've ever parsed data in a database, you know that there are some great discoveries to be found by who, what, when, where, why, and how. That's why journalists ask those questions. If those parameters are set in AI, do you not think in a matter of seconds, AI could go through all of the understanding that I have as a leadership coach, all the understanding I have as a communications coach, divide up who you are and why you think the way you do, and how did you come to those conclusions, and are they right or wrong, or are they acceptable or not acceptable? Are they socially acceptable or not socially acceptable? What about today, and what if they changed from yesterday? Because I'd be willing to bet if I dig into this 2000 turn of the century book on globalization, that it doesn't have a lot of the stuff that we've learned in the last 2 or 3 years about the World Economic Forum and the World Health Organization and the IMF, because these are new revelations. Oh, they're ideas that have been around for 150 years. Some of them have been around since the days of J.S. Morgan. Yeah, those things will change the way you live your life. But if AI could put all that data together, all that data about you, all that data about history, all that data about potential future, all of the prophetic ideas of Noel Harari and what might be, and then fashion them in the way that a fantastic fictional writer can draw you into an emotional roller coaster. Could AI manipulate you? Could AI deceive you? Could AI cause you to believe what is not true? There's nothing more heartbreaking than going down that path for a period of time and then realizing after you've invested emotionally, financially, relationally into an idea to find that that idea was not true. In fact, it was an intentional lie, Wuhan, that impacted the globe. People died, lives were changed, fortunes erased, futures, destinies derailed over some lies. What was the purpose of the lies? Who won in the end? Why did they do it? We may never know. But we know that the lies, the deceptions, they create massive distrust. So what happens as a leader when AI writes your content? Is it you? Can you stand behind it? Do you know the truth? Have you done the research? Is the evidence yours? Or have you trusted something that you cannot trust to do what really requires a lot of trust? It's my question to you. Maybe it's a question about integrity. I'm J. Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast for Tell All Like It Is TV. Have a blessed day.
Lauren is a master teacher on storytelling, and I learned so much. I'm really going to have to sit down and go back through everything, and I think I might have to have some more coffees with Lauren, but it was totally worth my time, and I really highly recommend it if you're looking to grow your ministry, grow your business, grow your career. Lauren will serve you well.